My name is Julie Taylor, and I am a family psychologist. I am used to difficult stories, to the confessions of people seeking salvation. But one day, a couple walked into my office, people who could not be helped. That day, a couple named Mark and Emily had scheduled an appointment. Both looked exhausted. Mark nervously tapped his fingers on the armrest of his chair, while Emily clutched a tissue in her hands, as if preparing to cry. Their eyes avoided each other.
"We need help,"
Mark finally said.
"We've reached a point where we can't go on like this."
I nodded, waiting for them to continue.
Our marriage is falling apart.
Emily's voice trembled.
It all started 6 months ago. Mark changed. He became distant, stopped talking to me, and then I found out the truth.
Mark let out a heavy sigh and ran a hand over his face.
"Emily thinks I'm to blame for what happened," he said, looking at me. "But I don't know if I could have done anything differently."
What exactly happened? I asked cautiously. Emily pressed her lips together.
We had a daughter,
Tears shone in her eyes.
Her name was Lily. She was 10 years old.
I froze. A heavy silence filled the room.
"That day,"
Mark continued, "I was driving home from work. It was late. Lily and I often took evening walks, but that night I was delayed. When I pulled up to the house, I saw an ambulance, police. Emily was standing at the door. She was hysterical."
Lily ran into the road,
Emily whispered.
and the driver couldn't stop in time.
"By the time I got there, she was already gone.
Mark's voice broke.
I never got to say goodbye."
I nodded sympathetically, but I felt they weren't telling me everything.
"Emily blames me.
Mark looked at his wife.
She thinks that if I had been on time, this wouldn't have happened."
Is that true? I asked Emily. She lifted her eyes, filled with pain.
That evening, Lily was waiting for you. She kept looking out the window, asking why you were late. I told her you'd be home soon, but she didn't want to wait. She ran outside because she wanted to meet you.
She sobbed.
If you had come home on time, she would have stayed inside.
"I couldn't.
Mark raised his voice.
I had work, you know how hard I try. I lost her too, Emily."
I could feel the tension rising rapidly.
We can't live together anymore.
Emily said firmly.
Every time I look at him, I see her. I see that night.
"And I see the way you look at me.
Mark whispered.
Like I'm a murderer."
Emily looked away.
Maybe you are.
I knew then that this marriage couldn't be saved. Lily's death had destroyed them both. Some wounds run too deep. They left in different directions. A few weeks later, I found out that Mark had taken his own life. Emily moved to another city. I hoped she could start anew, but months later, the news shook me once more. She was found dead in her apartment. Suicide. The note she left contained only one sentence.
I can't live with this anymore.
But the story didn't end there. When the police began investigating her death, dark secrets about Mark came to light. A large sum of money had been transferred to his bank account shortly before Lily's accident. Surveillance cameras near their home captured strange phone calls and meetings with an unidentified person. The investigation led to a shocking conclusion. Lily's death may not have been an accident. It turned out that Mark was in deep debt, and that tragic accident might have been part of a carefully planned scheme. But there wasn't enough evidence. When authorities reopened the case, they discovered that on the day of her suicide, Emily had met with a lawyer. She was about to reveal the truth, but she never got the chance. Soon after, Mark was posthumously found guilty of conspiracy and the premeditated murder of his daughter he was sentenced to life in prison. Some secrets should never remain in the dark, but the truth, no matter how horrifying, is not always uncovered in time.